Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. Bringing in new clients and customers. There is so much focus on this cold aspect of the sales funnel that you might be overlooking the warm gold mine right in front of you. And that simply is the follow-up. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. The most underrated and underused skill in sales is the follow-up, says sales guru and founder of Boom Sales, Trent Leyshan. All that hard work of finding new customers or clients goes to waste, he says, simply by not following up with a phone call or email. Often they're just waiting to hear back from you. Trent explains how to follow up using both traditional and digital methods. Process and structure, as you'll hear, is the key. If it's so effective, Chris Ashmore asks, then why don't businesses do it more often?
It could be lack of care, lack of process, lack of structure. I think the lack of care is sort of something that comes through a lot in transactional selling, because I guess can be an order-taking aspect to the selling process. So they just continue to move to the next prospect. And by doing that, they are demonstrating a lack of care, but it just maybe they're unorganised. They don't have the right processes in place. And the process is really important, I think, for a follow-up and structure. And the other thing to that is follow-up means work. There's a work element to following up. So everyone likes to talk to red-hot customers that really literally have their credit cards poised. But when you've got to do the work and you've got to follow up, and that might be 5 or 6 times, then that can be very time-consuming. So they go and gravitate towards the low-hanging fruit. So you're having a structured process, but also using data at the same time is really important to understand what works, and that's different in every business.
So how should we follow up? Do you have any suggestions on what a process could look like?
I would say stick them into a database and just blast them emails once every couple of days. No, just kidding. There's different ways of, that was a joke. There's different ways of following up. We use the digital platforms now as a way to stay connected. So there's a B2B environment. You're using platforms like LinkedIn. B2C is a little bit different. So you're connecting in using technology. Email obviously is a very fast and efficient way to follow up people, but it can be ineffective because most email is considered spam. We just get hammered with email, so it can be inefficient. It needs to be used in the right ways. But having a process and structure, and then obviously you need to be able to use data to understand how to manage your time effectively. Because if you've got 900 clients, there's no way you can follow up those 900 clients in 12 months. You need to be literally calling them daily because the maths just don't work. Not uncommon for us to go in and talk to a business and get an understanding of their process and customers and find that they just don't have time. They haven't called or followed up a key client in maybe 18 months, 2 years, just because they are, in their own world, time poor. But it's often just a symptom of a lack of process and structure.
Do you have an example of how following up through a process has worked for a business?
We radically transformed a business from 2 million to 18 million in revenue that had been in operations for 7 years. So the salespeople were just pumping out proposals and not following up. What we actually did was we contacted clients that we had identified that hadn't been converted to clients and asked them about their experience working with this company, and their overwhelming response was, I did meet with the salesperson, BDM. I thought their offer was quite good, but no one ever called me back. There was lots going in the front end of the sales process, but they weren't following up properly. The other example which we might use is when I bought my Ford Raptor, I made an inquiry to the dealer. I spoke with a gentleman there very briefly. I didn't have really an interest in buying the car. I was just sort of curious as to what it was, and it was a Ford Raptor, so it was new at the time, big beastie thing. I said thanks for that, and then he called me the next week and said, what do you think? Are you ready to buy? I said, look, I'm still thinking about it. He said, okay, well, I'll give you a little bit more time. And he rang me back the next week. He said, you're still thinking where you're at with it? And I said, yeah, I haven't really made a decision. And he said, well, then he started to negotiate. He offered me a reduced price, threw in all these extras, and then he followed me up for about the next month till I finally said yes. I didn't at the time really want the car, to be honest, but I developed a sort of relationship with him over that 5-6 weeks. He's had quite a playful, quirky way that he went about things. I sort of wanted the car, but I didn't have the urgency to take action. But it was through his process of following up, reintroducing the benefits of the car, introducing new things, and he was prepared to put some skin in the game and offer this and offer that. So he really wanted to get the deal over the line. It was through that process that we sort of built a relationship. And then I got to the point where I said, yes. And we had a bit of a joker after it because I said, look, that was one of the best follow-up processes I've ever seen. Do you do that with everyone? And he said, yeah, I try. But in my mind, I didn't really want it. It was an urgent need to buy it, but through his process, influenced me.
I'd suspect that you never said no in the process. You've said, I'll think about it, not yet, or that kind of thing. So unless, I suppose, until he hears the word no, an emphatic no, the deal is still there to be sold. Would that be fair to say?
It's a fair assessment. What I was giving him was the deadly maybe. Now, that maybe is extremely dangerous to a salesperson because you could have millions in your sales pipe of maybes. The reality is maybe 5% less of that pipeline will drop because you're not talking to the right person. You're not getting enough yeses. There's not a compelling reason to act today as opposed to maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year, maybe never. So I think you need to be resilient in the follow-up process. But again, you need to stick to your process, which is having a method because you trust the process.
Is there a particular time frame to follow up? Is it every second day? Is it the next week? Is it the next day? Or just depends on what it is, what your business is selling?
It does depend on the business. But I think there has to be an understanding of performance data. So what's working? So you'll go through your performance data maybe over the last 3 years and you'll be able to establish, okay, how long is the average buying cycle? On average, it's 60. Then I need to work out a frequency within that 60. I'll know if I'm going outside the parameters of what's reasonable. So on average, it may take 5 follow-ups to make that sale in that buying cycle. So I know that I shouldn't be at 30. And that's borderline harassment. And I know I shouldn't be at 1. But each business is different. If you have a ferocious appetite for follow-up, you'll be vastly more successful. It shows you care. It shows professionalism. It creates efficiencies. And it's a really, really potent skill that's often undervalued and underutilised. But the ferocious nature in which you follow up has to be structured and it's got to be done in the right way.
That's Trent Leyshan, founder of Boom Sales. Business Essentials Daily is a SoundCartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schilberger, Chris Ashmore, Jeff Waters and myself. Technical production by Pete Letts and Belinda Trimboli. I'm Nicole Goodman. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Be Daily next week. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.